Hello, everyone. It's Holden with Classroom Camp, and I found an article that I would like to talk about today because it is so on point. The title of the article is A Celebrated Teacher's 5-Point Explanation of Why She's Quitting Has Gone Viral. The school system is broken. It may be broken beyond repair. In the article, it says Michelle Mail was a first grade teacher before she resigned this month, and her 5-point explanation of why she did it is resonating with thousands. And I must say, it definitely resonated with me. So I'm going to give a short commentary on her 5 points and just offer a little bit of insight into what she is saying. So she posted this on Facebook. So if you want to look up Michelle Mail and see this for yourself, go on right ahead. But the 5 points that she mentions are class size, respect, testing, I felt like I was drowning, and then pay. So we're going to go through each of these line by line. So for class size, she says, everything in my training, what I know about kids and what I see every day says that early childhood classes should be at 24 or less, ideally 22 or less. Kids are screaming for attention. There are so many students who have social or emotional disorders. They need their teacher to take time to listen to them. And basically, she's saying how there's just too many students in the classroom. I can't give all of them the attention that they actually need. And I can attest to this situation she's describing. Now, given I have been teaching seventh grade for the past 3 years, and she's talking about early childhood classes, so it's a little bit different, but the research for the most part says that, in both primary and secondary classrooms, students learn best in groups and in smaller class sizes. At the start of last school year, my largest class roster was 32, and it did slim down a little bit because some students dropped out, and it ended up most classes were around 25 students. My largest class at the end of last year was 28 students, but this is chaotic and stressful for any teacher. It doesn't matter whether you are a seasoned teacher or a new teacher. Having that many personalities and that many papers to grade is a lot. And especially if the school's infrastructure is not designed to support that, if not all the disciplinary measures and things are in place. For new teachers, for example, you're told, don't put students out of the classroom. And new teachers who don't have their classroom management practices fully developed, that's a lot of times that's all they know to do. They got so many students in the class, and their option, their go-to is to put them out of the classroom, and it's frowned upon, and you're kind of looked down upon for that. Just this, the whole situation is stressful. And what's worse is that despite all the evidence that saying classrooms should be smaller, schools often insist on cramming as many students into the class as possible. And this is especially true of charter schools that are often seen as education for profit, and the leadership is trying to make as much money as possible. If you turn students down, you don't allow them to register, then you're essentially losing out on money. So yeah, it's a whole deal. So as far as class size, I 100% get what she's saying. A lot of these schools have just are packed. Classrooms are packed. It's like working in a factory. But and we could go on a whole tirade about this. That's kind of the way the education system is, and her saying that it may be broken beyond repair. This systematic way that education is these days, and just everything being standardized, it is oftentimes like a factory. But so her next point is respect. She says, I feel disrespected by the district all year long. They don't trust that I know what I'm doing. I have a college degree, go to trainings every year, read books and articles about kids, and most importantly, work with kids every day. Okay. This right here, I actually made the most notes on this because this is a personal thing for me. Um, Part of it is because I consider myself a lifelong learner, and I'm always reflecting on my practices, trying to improve, trying to try new things and do better. I'm actually in grad school right now pursuing my doctorate in curriculum and instruction. So I'm constantly pushing myself forward. But um, as an educator, you're often expected to be the epitome of professionalism, yet you often aren't treated like a professional. And this isn't just me saying it, she is basically implying this, and the people that I work with in the program, some of my colleagues, they echo some similar sentiments about feeling like they just aren't treated like a professional, or that their schools do treat them like a professional. But I have at times felt that way. For example, let's say your job is to teach a class. You understand your students, have the experience, know which strategies will work best in your classroom. Yet, leadership may step in and require you to run your classroom a certain way, even though you are the professional in the room. You see these students on a day to day basis, and you have some shadow entity, sometimes it feels this way, that is making all of these demands on you. You sometimes aren't allowed to use the evidence based practices you know students will respond to because of technicalities or because of specific things that you need to add into your plan just because, or things you need to do in your room. One example is the whole controversial thing about, having to put the 10 commandments in your classroom. Whoever said to do that, they are far removed from the classroom. They are far removed from your school, from your district, anything. But it's like the state saying you got to just add these things in. And I'm not making any comment on the 10 Commandments, but I'm just saying it's things like that. That's kind of what it feels like with people just saying you've got to do all these things. And so, despite all the data that you review on students, the collaboration that you have at school, strategic planning with your colleagues, someone may come in and say, "No, I want you to teach this." It happens and it can make you feel less than. To add insult to injury here, sometimes, for example, you're taught that you need to give sandwich feedback to students. You're told by administration, give sandwich feedback. You got to say one positive thing, then you got to say something that they need to work on, student needs to work on, then you got to say another and end on a positive. And we're expected to do this, but if we don't do something right or we try something new, whatever the case is, administration does not give us sandwich feedback. The same demands, the things that we're expected to do as educators, we don't receive that same respect back. So, my thing is always, I can't wait till someone criticizes my sandwich feedback because I'm going to be like, well, so I can't even get sandwich feedback on my sandwich feedback. Anyways, all right. The third thing that she talks about is testing. She says, stop testing your kids. It doesn't do anyone any good. Do you know which kids slept poorly last night? Do you know who didn't have breakfast? Do you know whose parents are fighting? And she goes on and on listing all these different circumstances as to why students might not perform well on tests, and how essentially I believe the argument is that testing isn't that accurate. There's a lot that can be said about testing. There's a lot that I could say about it. But what I'm going to harp on here is the fact that standardized testing goes against what we know about culturally responsive teaching. As I mentioned, I'm working on my doctorate right now, And culture as it relates to education is actually a topic I'm looking at for my dissertation. And what we know is that not all students are the same, especially when they come from different cultures. The fact of the matter is that standardized testing does not take into consideration the uniqueness of cultures or traditional ways in which people within cultures learn. There's also too much testing. And one reason for it is to obtain money. If you give certain assessments throughout the year, schools are able to obtain funds. This is to the detriment of students who may feel like they never get a break from testing. As the year goes on, they lose interest in testing and sometimes just want to click through to the end, put answers down, and be done with it. So you have the money incentive for testing. Even though we know that testing tires out the students, we call it testing fatigue, we still oftentimes give relentless testing throughout the year. And it gets to a point where students are like, we have to test again? We got to do this again? And they're not having it. And they will, if it's a computerized test, they will just click on through, or at least try to. If it is a test on paper, they'll just try to write some answers down. It's tiring, and it doesn't always produce the most accurate results. And there is also the issue of culture. You can do a deep dive into the origins of standardized testing, and I'm not going to go too much into it, but there is a whole um, there's lots of literature on the idea that certain tests are designed to exclude certain cultures. And that's all I'll say on that. But it is out there. So I can see what she's saying with testing, especially the money motivated aspect. Like some schools place the fact that they're going to get more funds above what's best for students, and not exactly a great thing. The fourth point, she says, I felt like I was drowning. So many things beyond teaching are pushed on teachers. Go to this extra meeting, try this new curriculum, watch this video, then implement it into your next lesson. Fill out this survey monkey to let us know how you feel, even though it won't make any difference. Okay. On that one, it's actually pretty funny because the surveys, a lot of people that I have seen don't fill out the surveys because we're told that it's anonymous, but you're sending out a Google form and it's going to have our work email attached to it. So I think that idea is just a little absurd. So oftentimes I could see this. I'm a little hesitant to fill out those surveys. But anyways, she says that there's basically too much teachers are asked to do. And so from my perspective, it's not only that teachers have to work plenty of hours outside of normal work hours without pay, such as back to school night or the fall carnival or the football game or whatever else you might have. You don't get paid for those things. You don't get paid. It's outside of normal work hours, but you got to show up. You get asked to volunteer, and volunteering is more like it's a it's an expectation rather than something that you could choose to do or not. It's like, if you don't volunteer, well, you're not going to get that promotion that you're probably not going to get anyways. But so aside from all of that, it's also the responsibilities which, in my opinion, should be taken care of by other departments within schools that are placed on teachers. So, for example, let me just pose a scenario. Let's say that you run a computer based class, all right? Or let's say that schools are going to issue computers to all of their students, or you're going to have computers in your classroom. But regardless, these days, every student has to use a computer for standardized testing. So it would make sense that if every student has to use a computer, then students, when they register for school, their parents or guardian have to fill out some type of computer usage agreement form, right? It would make sense because everybody has to use a computer. So to register and go to this school, you need to sign an agreement form. But let's say that that is included in the registration packet. So the IT department is going to be giving teachers the computer usage agreement form and saying, hey, we need you to make sure that all of your students get this form filled out and returned. You do not have control over whether or not these students are able to do this, whether or not they have a stable home to go to get someone to sign and do this. And why didn't the school do this when ask parents and guardians to do this when students signed up? It doesn't make any sense to me, at least, but these are the kinds of extra things that are just added on top of what teachers are already expected to do. You would think that, well, shouldn't someone else, like, isn't this someone else's responsibility? But it is placed on teachers. And then if you don't get it done, it's like you're the one that's held accountable for it. That's just one example, but there are plenty out there. And the last thing that she brings up is pay, which we have heard this to no end. She says, I knew becoming a teacher would never make me rich. That has never been my goal. I wanted to work with kids. I wanted to help kids. I wanted to make enough money to take care of my own kids. Sadly, this isn't the case for so many teachers who have to work 2 jobs to support their own families. This isn't right. So we have heard these complaints just for years now. And as a matter of fact, there's an article that I read recently about this one teacher who decided to live in his car to cut the cost of rent because he was living paycheck to paycheck, so far behind on his bills, couldn't get it approved for a reasonably priced apartment. So he just decided to live in his car, and he actually started a GoFundMe account to get help with his living expenses. And fortunately enough for this guy, he got over $17,000 of contributions, which I think is awesome because he seemed like a great guy. But these are the kinds of things that teachers have to deal with. Personally, I don't have any kids, and I'm not married or anything like that, so I don't have to take care of a family, but I can empathize with those teachers out there who do have families that they have to take care of, especially like the single mothers and things like that. But it's not easy. And if you've made mistakes in the past as well and you are behind, it is difficult to get caught up with the pay that teachers are given. So I see it. I mean, all of these points that she makes are on point. And that's why I wanted to talk about this article, because she gives some brief explanations for the reason for each of her points, but I thought that I could add just a little bit of commentary, and hopefully I was able to hit on some points that maybe offer a little bit more insight into what she is saying and just kind of give you an alternate perspective on this situation. True to what was said about this post going viral because of how it resonated with teachers, I completely agree. And that's actually all that I have to say on that for right now. That's my take. I hope you enjoyed this video. Be sure to leave a like and comment below. Also subscribe to the Classroom Camp YouTube channel and follow Classroom Camp on social media to stay up to date on all of our content. Remember, for a brighter future, Classroom Camp.